English translation, 480th contact, Saturday, 3rd October 2009, 14:58 hours.
What were you doing out there that smells so good?
You are here already. I just closed everything all around and put a scented lamp in the anteroom, so that it does not smell bad from the aviary. But welcome and greetings, my friend. I hope you have a little more time today than when you last visited.
Of course, I also offer you my greetings, dear friend. Yes, today I am not in a hurry.
Good, then I would like to bring up a question that relates to one of our conversations. It is about the statement that due to climate change and the influence of the sun on the Earth, huge masses of ice can melt away, so the enormous pressure caused by the ice can cause the Earth to bulge and possibly start to rotate faster. This is obviously a mistake for certain people who are not thinking very far ahead, because they mock the fact that such a process slows down the speed of rotation. Of course, once again, it is people with a scientific background who, firstly, misunderstand everything, and secondly, do not get to the point of what we are actually talking about, because their intelligence is simply not sufficient.
This assertion is nonsensical. Because if the melting process of the ice masses were to slow down the Earth in its rotational speed, then the bulge of the Earth would have to extend beyond the mass of the melted ice. This means that the bulge of the Earth would have to be greater in its mass, weight, and circumference than the mass of ice that melted away. But this will not be the case because, in fact, it is not yet certain whether such a massive worldwide melting of ice will occur. So far, this representation does not correspond to a prediction, but only to a possibility. The bulge of the Earth. If the worldwide enormous ice melting should actually become reality in an apocalyptic way, will only be very small and can be calculated in a few meters, whereas the ice masses in hundreds and thousands of meters have to be measured in relation to their thickness. This means that, despite the bulging of the ground on which the ice is melting, the outer circumference of the Earth is getting smaller, which may result in a greater rotational speed of the planet. This is, however, for the time being only a thesis and a possibility, and therefore not yet anything from which a prediction or a probability calculation can be made. But it is also quite clear that those people who think unrealistically and do not understand the whole thing, in terms of possible facts, are those who mock what we have discussed as thesis and possibility in relation to the worldwide ice melting and its consequences. Even a human being, who does not understand anything about matter, can deal with what we have discussed in his thoughts to such an extent that he understands that a bulge of a surface can only ever be as large as the full original dimension before something heavier lies on it and the surface is dented. If the pressure and the indentation on the surface disappears again, which is caused by an enormously heavy weight, then the pressed-in surface moves or bulges back into its original state, respectively.
And this is the bulge, which gives the Earth its real circumference again, which is somewhat smaller without the gigantic ice masses, which respectively could lead to a faster rotation.
This is the sense of the explained. But you still have one more question which you addressed to me and Quetzal about Florina and what you want to decide at the meeting today.
Well, then this other question. So, about Florina. I let you ask what we should do regarding the substitution for Christina, since there will surely be absences due to her illness.
I've consulted with Quetzal on this because he is more familiar with the abilities of the individual members of the group than I am, because these matters fall within his domain. During our consultation, we found that there is a need not only for Christina to have a job agency, but also for everyone else who is doing missionary work. This includes all work that is done in written form, as well as those that relate to the whole computer system and to manual work. Correctly. Not only one deputy should be considered, because necessarily two substitutes should always be available for the same thing, because one substitute can also be absent, so that another one must be considered.
I think that is of correctness. Therefore, we need to look into it. For the first time, however, it is necessary to find a substitute for Christina, namely for writing the WZ and for books. In advance, there have been voices which suggest Hans-Georg for this, but also that Bernadette should stand in for Christina, at least temporarily. Barbara and Daniela were also considered, although it is not possible for Barbara to do so for the time being, because she is very busy with her new vocational training. Daniela would probably be suitable because she also speaks German very well.
To consider Barbara and Daniela, that is good. But Barbara could only be called in as a substitute after her training. Daniela would be very well suited, but that must lie in her decision. And that Bernadette would take over the work on behalf of Daniela, but only in this way that would be acceptable, but it should really only be temporary. As far as Hans-Georg is concerned, both Ketzel and I are not of the opinion that he is suitable for the production and finishing of books and writings, because he largely lacks the flair and ability for the German language and its grammar. Other group members than Barbara and Daniela can also not be considered as Christina's substitute, due to the lack of the necessary prerequisites and the lack of time, etc.
Your explanation is probably true, but it is simply as you know that there is a lack of members who could be considered as substitutes. Yes, there are still quite a few people missing who would have to come to the core group, but they can't find their way. However, we must not approach those human beings who actually belong in the core group with regard to joining it, because they have to find the way and their responsibility themselves. Addressing them would be tantamount to missionary work, and that would not only be completely wrong, but is also prohibited.
That is indeed so, and I know it. Unfortunately, those human beings who have decided to do so at the earliest stage find it very difficult to find their way into the core group, because they do not recognize their responsibility and therefore, for all sorts of flimsy reasons, do not want to bear it either. The persons concerned are indecisive as a result of small and often only apparent personal problems, and consequently they shirk the responsibility which they would have to bear through their own primeval obligation. But there are also human beings who are not under an old obligation, but who should find their way into the core group or into the secondary core group, although there is also indecision and a failure against themselves. And it is to be said that secondary core group members, once the secondary core group is in place, can also carry out work in the center as it is given to the core group members.
Your eloquence in the ears of all those who should feel addressed by your words.
But I would like to add that some of those who should join the core group are caught up in a strong material, thinking and give much more value to the material than it is in terms of their conscious development and the fulfillment of the mission and purpose of life. Not infrequently, religious and sectarian delusions also play a major role in this, preventing those concerned from carrying out their duty. Under the surface, the fear in them of openly freeing themselves from religious and sectarian delusion in order to turn to the truth and reality is rotting. And this is unfortunately a fact that is spreading more and more all around, especially because religions and their sects are becoming more and more fanatical, infamous, unscrupulous in their missionary delusion, and are casting masses of human beings under the spell of their delusions. The fact that especially children and young people are thereby missionized, misled, and driven into delusions of faith is particularly reprehensible. Basically, this is done by parents and teachers, but also by sect gurus, converts, and teachers of religion, Imperceptibly for those affected, they are manipulated, infiltrated, and robbed of their intellect and their clear reason, and thereby made into servile, delusional believers.
Interesting how you use my words.
They are taken from your new book, God Delusion and God Delusional Disease, of which I have a computer printout, yes. The terms you mention in it are so apt that I think I will also use them in my own language. You use pure German terms in your works, so that everything is clearly understandable for all readers, which is unfortunately objectionable in the case of many authors who use foreign terms and words to give themselves a false impression of being educated. As a rule, they have a poor command of the German language, and for this reason alone, they often search for foreign words in foreign works which they can insert into their own works and which are not understood by the majority of readers. But this is not the purpose of the exercise. As you are wont to say, for written works prove to be of great value not by the foreign words they have collected, but solely by their content, which, moreover, must be written in a language that can be generally understood. It is necessary that foreign words be omitted unless their meaning is clearly explained. But that your new book will soon be published and distributed, I want to say that this is important. And what else is to be said about the German language? Already at a very early time, when the mission was decided, it was recognized that in modern times only one language and its variations can present everything according to correctness. Thus it was decided at an early stage that the mission would give priority to the pure German language, to which there is no equivalent comparison in all earthly languages, and that consequently only through the German language could everything be expressed and explained in a correct and accurate way. All other earthly languages show great poverty in their expressiveness, and consequently they use inadequate and falsifying terms, which specifically denote something completely different in the German language. But in the many earthly and extremely deficient languages, terms are also used which trivialize and trivialize powerful German terms. As a result, when translating, respectively when translating terms of the German language into the other deficient earthly languages, inadequate paraphrasing must take place, whereby the real and deep meaning of what is expressed in the German language is lost. This, however, already corresponds to a falsification of the original text, which in the course of time leads to further and further changes and falsifications due to wrong interpretations, etc., so that the original text and its meaning can ultimately no longer be recognized.
Bernadette has finished the book so far that we could put it into proofreading, so it might go to press this year, or at the latest in spring 2010.
That is very good, because the publication of this work is of urgent necessity.
We all think so too. But it will be the case that a lot of people who believe in the delusion of God will again raise themselves as enemies against Figu and I, and bad things will happen again. But that does not bother us, at least not me, because I am used to being attacked and slandered by religious people. Sectarians, know-it-alls, and critics, as well as envious people and other lunatics who do not like my face, my language, and everything I shout out into the world.
Nevertheless, it will not be easy for you.
I have already adjusted myself to this, to what has been, which can happen again.
Your attitude to that is known to me.
That also does not change, because
Excuse me, I am being called. I am sorry I have to go, but I will come back to see you next Wednesday. Goodbye, dear friend.
Pity. I also wanted to ask you about predictions. Bye then, my friend, and see you Wednesday.
Until Wednesday, there are not any unusual things to be mentioned as predictions anyway, so nothing is lost in this respect.
Also good. Then also goodbye.